Maple Leaves, Mounties, and Moose. The Breeders' Cup visits Canada. Salutations and welcome, friends. My name is Matthew Desantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. And this is another episode of Countdown to Keeneland on the Trust the Profits YouTube page. Make sure to click that like button, click that subscribe button, get all of our content, not just from me, but from all of the guys on the Trust the Profits platform. And the great part is each of us has our own style, our own focus. If you're interested in Breeders' Cup news, I got you covered. If you're interested in weekly bets at Belmont, oh no, wait a second, Aqueduct, or is it Bell Duct, or is it Aquamont, or whatever you want to call it. But we got that sort of thing covered. We got long-term previews of big-time stakes races like the Pennsylvania Derby that are already up, and a lot of other content. So no matter what you're in the mood for, if you're a horse racing fan, definitely make sure to press that like and subscribe button and be a part of the Trust the Profits YouTube page. We always love interacting with our fans, hearing back and hearing feedback. And one of the things I want to say really quickly is thank you for all of the likes and the views of the first two episodes of Countdown to Keeneland. I really appreciate it. I've been having a lot of fun. And this is a big episode because we have a lot of things to recap that happened last weekend overseas, in particular at Cora and Leopardstown, as well as here domestically at Kentucky Downs, before moving forward to, as I teased in the preview, a huge weekend at Woodbine. That's right. There are three Win and You're In Breeders' Cup races taking place in the Great White North. That is at Woodbine in Canada. And so I got you covered for those three races, whether that be the Summer Stakes, the Natalma, or the Woodbine Mile. So really excited to have you on this episode of Countdown to Keeneland. Lots to cover. Like I said, you can follow me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. And we got a lot more Breeders' Cup to go. As close as we are 6-7 weeks away from the Breeders' Cup, we still have about 35 plus Breeders' Cup Win and You're In races to go. And one of the things that's really exciting is we're just starting to get into some of these juvenile races. We just had the first batch of juvenile Win and You're In qualifiers last weekend. Obviously, it's not a Win and You're In, but we do have the first Kentucky Derby prep for 2023 this weekend at Churchill Downs in the Grade 3 Iroquois. So there's a lot already happening with these 2-year-olds. And so that's one of the things we'll be focusing on in this show, is talking to you about that, getting you acclimated, getting you up to speed about these 2-year-olds who many of you may not know much about, and because they only have 1 or 2 races under their belt, but getting you ready for who are the names to watch out for as we move towards that first weekend in November at Keeneland for the Breeders' Cup. So as I mentioned, we have a lot going on here. We're going to recap last week, preview next week, and then share some news and updates that impact the Breeders' Cup and some of the horses that might be participating in this year's Breeders' Cup at the end. But let's not waste any more time. Let's dive right into the recap of what happened last weekend. And there were 2 really significant races that obviously took place in Kentucky and overseas in terms of the Irish Champion Stakes and the Kentucky Turf Cup. Domestically at the Kentucky Turf Cup, you saw Red Knight, the Mike Maker trained horse, win the Grade 2 race. This is by far and away the biggest win of this 8-year-old gelding's career. Great ride. And it was an interesting race because last week I came here and said I was not sold on Gufo, who was running in that race as well. Gufo was, of course, only 2 weeks removed from the Sword Dancer. And I thought, wheeling a horse back at 1.5 miles is always a dicey proposition. I thought, particularly in North America, where horses are not traditionally trained to do that. And Gufo had never done that in his career. But Gufo gave a hell of a performance, just lost the head bob to Red Knight, who ended up winning, I believe, at 12-1. This was a pretty nice long shot there. But definitely the story was, how all of these horses performed now qualifying for the Longines Turf and Red Knight. And it should be pointed out, Mike Maker, I mentioned this last week, was on fire at Kentucky Downs, winning at a well over 25% clip. And so he had several horses entered in that Kentucky Turf Cup, Red Knight actually being the least heralded of them. But really, like I said, big performance there for Red Knight, who now qualifies for the Breeders' Cup. Gufo, you'll inevitably see at the Breeders' Cup as well, because as you see, he's already qualified as well through the Sword Dancer just a few weeks ago. Interesting race, though. A lot of people were on Arklow, horse for a course, 2 wins, 2 seconds, and 4 career starts at Kentucky Downs. Arklow was well positioned in that Kentucky Turf Cup, but just really couldn't close. So a little bit of a disappointment there from him, as well as from the horse Temple. I grew up not far from Temple, Pennsylvania. Maybe that's why I like the horse Temple. But that's a horse that really is always very consistent underneath. I thought you could rely on him in exotics, and just really did not run a very good race, did not take to that Kentucky Downs turf particularly well, which we talked about can be very distinctive and unique for horses. But really, the more thrilling race, I think, and the one that got me up on Saturday morning was the Irish Champion Stakes. And this was won by Aidan O'Brien's 3-year-old champion, Luxembourg. This is a horse that could very well be the next monster coming out of the Aidan O'Brien barn that we in America start to get to see and become more familiar with. I think people overseas have had their eye on this colt for quite a while. This was the first time stepping up in class at this distance. This was a 1.25 mile race at the Irish Champion Stakes. So doing that 10 furlong distance, had won going 10 furlongs the previous race, but did it at a Group 3. Obviously stepping up against a Group 1, stepping up against horses like Vidini and Broom and Mishriff. Very, very classy field. This horse's only 6th career race. Amazingly, 5 wins in those 6 career races. The only time this horse didn't win, had a little bit of gate trouble actually in about its 3rd start, stumbled out of the gate a bit. It really just kind of never got in a groove, never recovered in that particular outing. But Luxembourg just looks so impressive. Bided his time, sitting mid-pack. It was a smaller field, but still sitting mid-pack, then making a great run, getting past Onesto at the end. Onesto, though, another horse I really want to talk about, even less seasoned than Luxembourg. Only 5th career race for Onesto, who's actually already won at 1.5 miles. So this is a horse that's very comfortable going that marathon distance in Onesto, and just got edged out by Luxembourg in the Irish Champion Stakes. Like I said, really thrilling race. And solid efforts from Vidini and Mishriff, who finished 3rd and 4th. But I have to say, a little bit of a passing of the baton. We've been seeing this in some of these turf races. I've been talking about this, whether it was a couple weeks ago with horse like Gold Phoenix out at Del Mar, winning the handicap and being kind of a new name to burst onto the scene, whether it's a horse like Soldier Rising that finished just underneath at the Sword Dancer. Now you're seeing overseas Luxembourg and Onesto getting the best of the more established names in Vidini, Mishriff, Broom that we as in North America have gotten to know over the last couple of years through the various connections. But you're starting to see this new crop really pop up. A little bit of a passing of the guard there in the Irish Champion Stakes, but certainly this is turning out to be just a phenomenal Longines Turf field. Certainly hoping as many of them can come over as possible. The next win you're in that you see is the Arc coming up. That's the first. I believe October 1st, actually. And so that's going to be just in a couple of weeks. So very excited about that. But like I said, great field there in that Longines Turf. So now let's go to the Filly and Mare Turf. And this was one of my favorite performances of the weekend, and that's Pearls Galore winning the Justify Matron Stakes for trainer Patty Twomey. And Pearls Galore, man alive, front running effort. You don't see that very often in these longer distance races, 10 plus furlong races, particularly overseas, because a lot of times turf racing, you look for that turn of foot. It's uncommon to see front runners win. Now, it's not impossible. You've seen horses like an Italian win on the front end. You've seen some Chad Brown horses over the last couple of months win on the front end. Certainly you can do it. Of course, like Trepouvan comes to mind as well. So it's not as if it's impossible, but against a very, very strong field in the Justify Matron Stakes, you would expect somebody to be able to make a move. And this was really Pearls Galore going up against Saffron Beach, who had gotten the best of her a few times before. Saffron Beach, very, very good horse, jockeyed by Emma Jane Wilson, Holly. And so this is one of those where Pearls Galore goes out on the front end, sets, I think, a pretty decent pace, and then just really turns it on coming for home. Every time Saffron Beach tried to make a run at her, Pearls Galore just kept going and couldn't have been more impressive. So, like I said, very, very impressive effort from Pearls Galore. Also, the biggest win of her career. We talked about obviously Red Knight, biggest win of his career in that Kentucky Turf Cup. Pearls Galore, same sort of thing. Had it second in a couple of grade ones, actually finished second to No Speak Alexander in the same race last year, the Justify Matron Stakes. But this is really the breakthrough performance for Pearls Galore. So you had to feel good for all the connections there. That front running effort, something I always love to see in the turf, because like I said, you don't see it a lot. And to be able to repel Saffron Beach, such a classy horse, coming down the stretch was really, really impressive. So let's move on from the Filly and Mare turf, which, like I said, that field's getting more and more packed as well. You just have two more win and you're in races. And obviously, just because you win a win and you're in race, these are not the only horses that are going to be in these fields. I should make that clear. Other horses will qualify through points and qualify through winning or placing or showing in various grade 1, grade 2, or grade 3 races. But these are the horses that are guaranteed an invitation to the respective 14 horse fields in the different divisions. Obviously, like I said, other horses will qualify through points. Some of these horses may not make the trip. We'll probably start hearing more about that in the next couple of weeks in terms of who's in, who's out. So there's going to be musical chairs here. But like I said, those win and your ins are filling up quickly in the various older divisions. So then let's talk about the turf sprint. And this was a really great effort from a couple of horses here. First, you had Brand winning the FanDuel Turf Sprint at Kentucky Downs. This was a horse. This was my top choice, actually. Brand was my top pick. If you follow me on Twitter, I do a Friday morning live stream with a couple of other guys where we talk about Stable Duel, which is a horse racing fantasy game contest, and we try to give out long shots to play, not just for that contest, but just in general at the windows. Brand was my top pick in this Turf Cup. He was morning line 6-1 and somehow went off at 11-1. And I don't understand how that happened exactly, because nothing in Brand's profile suggested he should be 11-1. Arrest Me Red, the favorite, very good horse, but also drew the far outside. Also, because of the Scratcher Gregorian chant, you ended up getting Artemis City Limits drawing into the field. Artemis City Limits acted as the speed that changed the dynamic a little bit for Arrest Me Red, who sat back and was hooked a little wide. Brand sat a really great trip, kind of mid-pack, made a run, and just out-finished Artemis City Limits at the very end. But Brand was a horse who's one of the better turf sprinters out on the West Coast. We talked about Lieutenant Dan last week, who I think is probably the class out there, but Brand is right behind this horse. Very, very good effort, and had shipped well in Kentucky before, had run well at Churchill Downs in the past. So this was a horse I sometimes can be very hesitant to get behind West Coast turf horses shipping east, but had proven that he could run well under those conditions before. I just thought at 11-1 was just a massive value play. Ended up winning. So that was, it was good for me. I won a few bucks there, but that was it's a really good effort, and glad to see a horse like Brand get there. Brand had been a horse that was kind of knocking on the door, always getting second to a horse like Arrest Me Red, and just had a feeling that today was going to be the day, or last Saturday was going to be the day that he was going to break through, and he did. So great effort there. But man alive, the performance from this division that I'll remember from this weekend was Highland Princess, who you can see up there twice, has won 2 win and you're in races, both initially the Nunthorpe Stakes and now the Dubai Flying 5. Actually, the winner of not 1, not 2, but 3 consecutive Group 1 races is Highfield Princess. Incredible effort, huge field, and just found another gear late. And this was one where everybody was starting to make their move. Everybody was trying to get the jump at the very end, and it was such a large field. It was probably close to 20 horses. And so they're spread out across the track. Everybody's trying to make a run. And for a while, it looked like everybody was kind of even. It was going to be a close finish, you think. And then about a half furlong out, Highfield Princess just found another gear and just ended up winning by about 4 lengths and just pulling away at the end from everybody else. Just incredibly impressive performance there from Highfield Princess. Anyone who wins 3 consecutive Group 1s, any horse that wins 2 winning-your-ins, going to be a major contender. So very excited to see this turf sprint, how it turns out. But hopefully Highfield Princess can come over here and show its stuff at the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland. Now, I mentioned we're starting to move into the juvenile season, and we're starting to get to this point where the juvenile races and the juvenile win-in-your-ins are starting to pop up. We had the first win-in-your-in for the Juvenile Turf this past weekend at the KPMG Champion Juvenile Stakes. This was another winner by Aidan O'Brien. Augusta Rodin was just such a good effort, made a really nice move about 2 furlongs out, and most importantly, was able to sustain that move, did not get tired at all, was able to keep going. This is a horse that looks like it still has a lot of room to fill out, too, when you watch that race. It's a horse that still is a lot of legs, a lot of legs, very, I don't want to say gangly because the horse is well built and certainly well balanced, but does look like you could tell it's a 2-year-old. I mean, even compared to some of the other competitors, look like it could still fill out a little bit more. And so this is a horse that I think still has more and more upside, obviously, but very impressive effort. What was impressive to me was horse started, like I said, made a move about 2 furlongs out, maybe a furlong and a half, was able to sustain that move, hold off challengers, and more importantly, it didn't look like the horse was running hard. I thought that was something that was very important to notice. You could tell the horse was going all out. Wasn't as if the jockey eased her up at the end or anything like that, or him up at the end. Was still making a very, very strong run, but it just didn't look tired. He just looked, like he was just running in a field, and it wasn't a big deal. It did not look like he was laboring. So something to keep in mind. Horse looks like could take some more distance and can, really keep up a pretty strong pace. So very impressive effort. Aidan O'Brien always has some great horses. But as you can see, there are still 5 more win-in-your-in races for this particular division. And you're going to see a whole lot more horses qualify for this juvenile turf in the various grade 1, grade 2, 3 efforts that are out there. So like I said, very, very impressive effort there from Augusta Rodin. And let's go to my favorite performance from this weekend, which was at the Moyglare Stud Stakes, and that was Taria. Just an incredible effort. The Dermot Weld horse and filly, like I said, might be my biggest, my favorite race from this weekend. Huge upset over Meditate. This was Meditate. You have to understand what came in to the Moyglare 4 for 4 in her career, 3 group wins, 2 group 2 wins. By far and away was the class of the field. Taria had won a maiden race, and that was it. This was only the 2nd time ever out. And this was one where it looked like Meditate got the jump on the field. And Meditate was leading up front and just looked like the jockey had read the race perfectly and really got the jump and started to pull away. And all of a sudden, you see Taria just coming down the center of this track and just tracking Meditate down with every single stride. Goes up alongside Meditate, blows right by Meditate, ends up being about 2 lengths clear of Meditate by the end. And here's the more impressive thing. For both Meditate and Taria, they were 6-7 lengths clear of the next horse. So the two of them really put on a show, pulled away from everybody else, showed a lot of class there. And Taria, like I said, just such a good effort to really track Meditate down and pass him like she was nothing. That was just so incredibly impressive. So hats off to Taria. Great performance. Great way to kick off the Juvenile Filly Stakes. But we're going to have a lot more juvenile races in the coming weeks, obviously, including one actually this weekend, which is a good transition to talking about the races at Woodbine. So we have several races at Woodbine this Saturday, 3 in particular that are win-in-your-in races. We're going to start with the Summer Stakes, which is a qualifier for the Juvenile Turf. It's 1 mile on the turf at Woodbine. Woodbine, remember, has that outer turf. It's a one-turn mile turf. You don't see that very often. In fact, I don't really know of any other tracks off the top of my head where you have one turn. I guess you do at Belmont sometimes, but it is uncommon to see one-turn mile turf races because most times they're inside the dirt track at Woodbine. They're outside of the dirt track. So exciting weekend for Woodbine. The Summer Stakes, really nice field here. A lot of these horses are trying a new distance for the first time. Many of them have been running 5.5, 6, 6.5, maybe 7 furlongs, but nobody's ever stepped up to a mile. So distance is always a question mark until you do it. Obviously, a lot of these horses have the pedigree to suggest that that's not going to be a problem. And certainly the training and the works to demonstrate that, they're putting out 5 furlong works in a minute flat or thereabouts. So, showing that they should be able to handle distance pretty well. We'll start with the number 1 horse, actually, Mysterious Night. This is the Charlie Appleby horse. This is a horse with already a grade 3 win, making a North American debut. Charlie Appleby bringing horses over to North America. He does a pretty good job with it. Does a pretty good job everywhere, to be honest, but winning 50% of races coming over to North America in the first start. Here's the most impressive one. He's brought 3 2-year-olds over this year. He's won all 3 of those races. When he brings these kids over, he's winning. And he's bringing not just himself and not just Mysterious Night, but he's bringing William Buick. That matters. It's one of the things I will always pay attention to is whether or not the top European trainers bring over their respective jockeys. Does Aidan O'Brien bring over Ryan Moore? Does Charlie Appleby bring over William Buick? Those are things I look for versus are they using a local jock on their horse that they're bringing over? A lot of times when they bring over their own jockey, tells you what they think about the horse in a lot of ways. So that's one where Mysterious Night's a horse you absolutely have to take seriously. Is going to be the favorite. I have a hard time thinking it's not going to be the overwhelming favorite in this particular race. And has also run the longest of anyone in the field, it should be pointed out. Ran 7 furlongs last time out. So it's been the closest to running that mile distance. Going to be tough to take down for sure. Now, you're going to see a common trainer name here in the number 3 horse, Appraise, trained by Chad Brown. So horse broke its maiden at Saratoga, regressed a little bit last time out, might actually be more of a sprinter. The one turn might not be bad, but might actually like less distance, might like 5.5, 6.5, maybe 7 furlongs. Interesting. The sire's offspring is a little bit more effective going shorter. I know some people might kind of poo-poo diving into pedigree, but when it comes to these 2-year-olds, it's just one of the, you don't have a lot of data points to look at. You don't have a lot of experienced races to go back and look at the tape of. Notoriously speed figures for 2-year-olds can be very unpredictable. Even the people who make the speed figures will tell you that. So that is one area where I do go back to pedigree a lot, looking at those 2-year-olds. Like I said, the pedigree there up top in particular, the sire tends to win turf sprints at about a 16% rate, turf routes at a 12% rate. So like I said, not bad either, but might trend a little bit more towards the shorter distances, and both the sire and the dam are unraced, which was interesting. So of Appraise. So Appraise might attract a lot of money because of Chad Brown, Manny Franco, but that's a horse I may not be staying away from. Philip My Dear is 2 for 2 winning, won the prep race for this one, going against a lot of other horses in this field. The Soaring Free Stakes has Sunday Silence as his grandsire, so obviously a lot of people are going to like that connection. Like I said, very strong connections with Attard and Kimura. Those two are winning at a very high clip when they team up together. So something certainly to keep in mind there. I will draw your attention to 2 Cassie runners. Mark Cassie, probably the biggest trainer up there at Woodbine, or one of the biggest trainers up there at Woodbine. The 94 Expos, that's the horse that'll probably attract more money, but that's a horse that got passed going 6.5 furlongs last time out. I don't know. Now you're going a mile. You expect this horse to hold off others in the field. More of a front runner. Didn't show that could sustain that run at 6.5 furlongs. I doubt it'll do that in a mile. I'm actually more interested in Stay On Her Good Side, which is a very cute play on words. But Stay On Her Good Side is breaking from the outside. You should get a little bit more of a price there. This is a horse that tried the turf for the first time, really showed something, finished third in that Soaring Free Stakes, but was really coming at the end, passing horses, only finished third by 3/4 of a length to the winner, which was Philip My Dear. And so first time out in turf really showed this horse could do something. And so I was impressed by that. You might, like I said, get a little bit more of a price there, but a good field. Excited to see how this all sorts out. Now, the Woodbine Mile, this is a big race. Obviously, you see a lot of very familiar names up here. You see horses like Mighty Heart, Ivar, Wakanaga, Modern Game, Cheryl Spate. You see a lot of big names that North American turf racing fans should recognize, or even United States turf racing fans should recognize. Modern Game's probably the favorite, probably best remembered in North America for that absolutely insane decision last year in the Juvenile Turf to run for purse money only. This is a horse that's very, very good on its own. Won grade one after winning that Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf last year, ran against some of the best in the world. This is the thing. Don't be deceived when you look at the running lines and see a lot of thirds and fourths and fifths and seconds. This is a horse that ran against Vidini. This is a horse that ran against Baid, who we're going to talk about, the absolute monster, the 10 for 10, the perfect horse overseas. Finished second to Baid by only a length and a half last time out. So Modern Games is in very good form. And again, Charlie Appleby, William Buick. I trust those two quite a bit. Ivar, another really interesting horse, ran incredibly well at Indiana Grand on the turf after an 8-month layoff. Last had run in that Breeders' Cup, then comes back at Indiana Grand, runs in a stakes race, wins that over some nice competition, some like at Hop Brown, a few other really good horses there. Certainly can hold his own in a grade one. So very, Palo Lobo always gets the horses ready, a very effective trainer, very effective horse. If you're looking for maybe a little bit more of a price, I like that. Wakanaka, that's a horse I'm a huge fan of. I'm kind of waiting for this horse to have a breakthrough. And interestingly enough, this is a horse that was kind of running up against some real strong Chad Brown horses at Gulfstream Park, up at Saratoga. Finally, last time out, went up to Woodbine, got itself a stakes win. So likes that turf at Woodbine, has run well on that turf at Woodbine. I like Wakanaka a lot. I also like Bill Mott quite a bit, but as a trainer. But Wakanaka is a horse that really, if you look back at those races that it's run overseas in Italy, has been running at a mile. So that's the distance this horse prefers. Now you got the Woodbine Mile here, one-turn feature of it. I actually think will be a little bit more comfortable for Wakanaka. Again, if you're looking for a little bit of a price, you might be able to find it there, just depending on how the morning line and some of the betting shakes out. Now, I'll give you one last kind of horse to think about, which is Homer Screen. It's a Brazilian horse trained by Neil Drysdale, jockeyed by Joe Bravo. Homer Screen is interesting because I think this horse is going to get the trip. Because what's important to point out is that Town Cruise is getting the blinkers taken off. Town Cruise is normally front end speed. Blinkers off, horse might sit a little bit more. That's usually what a trainer wants when they take the blinkers off. But you never know. Obviously, horses respond different ways to those things. But still, outside of Town Cruise, Homer Screen really doesn't have any other competition on the front end. This is a horse that might be able to set its own fractions on the front end, have plenty left for home. Watch for Homer Screen at a little bit of a price in this particular race. Well, let's hit the last one, the Natalma, whose name I butchered earlier in the segment. But the Natalma is a great race and a really fun one this year. I think we have a really interesting group of horses. A lot of them have run against each other in some of the prep races leading up to this. Very nice field. And I'd imagine the morning line favorite and the eventual post time favorite is going to be Cairo Consort, the number one horse. This is like I said, the likely favorite, has beaten several of the horses in this field last time out in a stakes race. So has a stakes win under her belt, is stretching out, which almost everybody is. I'm going to get to that in a second. But almost everybody has only ever run 6.5, 5.5, furlongs. Now we're going a mile. Again, pedigree, workouts. These are things that are important. Cairo Consort turns in a dynamite workout last time out. I think 1 minute and 2, 5 furlong workout. Very, very good. Nathan Squires, the trainer, is going to have this horse ready to go. Gallardo should give this horse a good ride from the inside. The horse I'm interested in this particular race is G. Laurie, the Grand Motion horse, jockeyed by Manny Franco. Why am I interested in this horse? This horse has the least experience in the field, broke its maiden last time out, and his only career race. So broke its maiden first time, is now immediately stepping up into pretty big competition. Here's the thing. Grand Motion is not one to place horses irresponsibly. he tends to place horses where he thinks they have a really good chance to win. And that tells me a lot that he's moving G. Laurie up to the Natalma Stakes in his second career start. The other thing is go back and watch that maiden victory at Colonial Downs. Here's why you want to watch it. It was a mile and 16th, 2 turns. This horse can get the distance. I'm not worried about that at all. In a field of question marks, in terms of distance, in terms of can they keep up the pace? Is their turn of foot going to wear out coming down the stretch? I'm not worried about G. Laurie. G. Laurie ran that race at Colonial, made a move around the third and fourth turn that was just impressive. And then once she got straightened out and came for home, just started pulling clear of the field, won by 6 lengths, easy as can be. It was such an impressive effort. Now, here's the thing. The speed figures came back slow on that. Now, what did I just mention in the summer stakes? Speed figures are notoriously unreliable for 2-year-olds. They really are. It's tough to set those speed figures on 2-year-olds because you don't know how strong the field is in a lot of cases. You don't have a lot of data points on these horses to be able to determine what's the proper speed figures. So it's not uncommon to see really big jumps sometimes in speed figures from a maiden race to its first stakes race because you're starting to get a better sense of what the speed figures actually are there. So this is one where when it comes to juvenile races, I don't rely on speed figures very often as much as I like looking at the rides, looking at how horses respond, looking at the maturity of the horses, etc., particularly for 2-year-olds who could be a little immature, a little goofy. You want to see how do they handle themselves on the track. G. Laurie looked like she had the goods. And so you might be able to catch a little bit of a price there on a horse that I'm pretty interested in. All right. Well, let's transition from recapping, previewing, to talking about some of the news that's still out there for the Breeders' Cup. And so, obviously, next week, I'm going to recap all those Woodbine races, look ahead to a few more that we have in the coming weeks. But a very exciting weekend. Have a couple of pieces of news about 2 of the best horses in the world. One is Baaeed. Baaeed is not going to the Arc, which a lot of people thought he would. That was kind of maybe the initial assumption was that he was going to head to the Arc in October. And of course, the Arc, as I mentioned earlier, is a grade 1 win, Group 1, I should say. I'm sorry, win in your in race for the Breeders' Cup. But inevitably, Baaeed is going to run his final race. That's right. You heard me. His final race is going to come at the Kipco Stakes at Ascot coming up. So you're not going to see Baaeed come over to Keeneland if there was ever any hope for that. That's obviously gone. And the last race is going to be at a mile distance, not at the 12 furlong distance of the Arc. And that was one of the questions. Baaeed stepped up and ran that 10 furlongs distance last time out, but had not ever gone over 10 furlongs. And all the previous races had been a mile or less, going back to a mile at Ascot. So this is a horse that, disappointing not going to be able to see Baaeed come over here to the United States and run at Keeneland or anywhere else for that matter. But obviously want to cherish what this horse is doing. Going 11 for 11 potentially in this last effort would be quite something else. A horse always wants to compare, horse people want to compare him to Frankel. I just want to compare him to himself, Baaeed, and see kind of he's going to have his own legacy in that regard, and not try to sully it and either degrade him by comparing him to another super horse in Frankel, or try to say one's lesser than the other. They're both phenomenal horses. Excited to watch him run, but you're not going to see him at the Arc, which is, like I said, that 12 furlong distance. And I mentioned this last week when I was talking about Baaeed and Flightline. These are 2 horses that are handled very similarly in some ways, that they're very carefully handled. And that's not a criticism. I like horses that are carefully handled in terms of being put in the right spots, being put in a position to be successful. That means a lot to me. It shows you they care about the horse. They also listen, no doubt, they care about what's, the course's legacy in terms of potentially going undefeated, et cetera. There's a lot of other considerations there. But this is a horse that, like I said, has been handled, not with kids' gloves, but has been handled very carefully, a little bit less carefully maybe than Flightline. But he's another horse that's been up in the news. Staying overseas before we get to the Flightline news, Dramatized, which is a turf sprint horse over there, who won the Queen Mary Stakes at Ascot just recently. Looks like the trainer Carl Burke is going to consider sending this horse to Keeneland for the Juvenile Turf Sprint. That is at least the pointing direction for dramatized. So that's going to be a big boon for that particular race to get dramatized over here. Very impressive horse, had won a couple of efforts. Didn't run great at York last time out, but again, won that Queen Mary at Ascot. That's always speaks for itself. We'll finish with the Flightline news. The news came out on Tuesday that Flightline's stud career has been sorted out. He will stand at Lane's End. That agreement has been reached between Flightline's owners and Lane's End. And so we're already seeing where Flightline is going to go for his career after he leaves the racetrack. Now, why am I bringing this up in terms of Breeders' Cup news? Well, we all know he's going to run in the Classic. That's at least where he's been pointing. Everything suggests he's going to be running in the Classic. But I mentioned that there might be a 5-year-old campaign. The ownership group after the Pacific Classic reiterated that there might still be, and they were very enthusiastic, in fact, about a 5-year-old campaign. I have us to say the news that they've already reached an agreement with Lane's End, and it's not uncommon for horses to continue to run well after they've reached these agreements and continue to run for another year. I will just say the probability of Flightline running at 5, in my opinion, has declined based upon this. Now, maybe he does what Nick Sko did, runs the Classic and runs the Pegasus at 5. I don't know. That still seems unlikely, I think, in a lot of ways. So, because if he wins the Breeders' Cup Classic, what does he have to prove? And so, certainly that's something we'll continue to keep an eye on, see if we get any more updates from the owners. But obviously, big news whenever Flightline name pops up in your social media feed. Well, speaking of social media, make sure to follow me, Matthew Desantis, on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. And make sure to follow all of our content at Trust the Profits. And we have so much coming for you. We got a lot coming this week. Like I said, the Aqueduct meet that's supposed to be at Belmont. So is it the Belmont meet at Aqueduct? I guess that's what they're calling it. We got the Pennsylvania Derby coming up. I'll be there next week at the Pennsylvania Derby. So any fans out there want to come up, say hi. I'll be wearing my little cap, so you can always spot me. I was going to say look for an Italian guy with a big nose, but honestly, that describes half the people at Parks and half the people from Philadelphia. I grew up there. I can say that. It's okay. But listen, should be a lot of great content coming up here in the next few weeks for Trust the Profits. So like I said, make sure to press that like and subscribe button. Make sure to share with all your friends and family who are into horse racing. And remember, until next time, my name is Matthew Desantis, and it's now post time.